Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video from me, or if you're new around here, hello and welcome. My name is Katie Marie, and on my channel we talk about makeup, or more specifically we talk about eyeshadow palettes, because that is my sweet spot when it comes to makeup. I just love trying new eyeshadow palettes. I love just trying new ways of putting color combinations together. I love the indie world when it comes to eyeshadow palettes, so if you like any of those things at all, definitely recommend you stick around, check out this video, see if you like it, subscribe if you do, and if you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button, as it just helps me out in the whole YouTube algorithm. But today's video, as you guys saw from the title of the video, is going to be about ranking my pastel palettes. So I don't have a ton, like this isn't a huge list. There's 8 palettes that I have in my collection that I would classify them as a whole as my pastel palettes. And so I thought it'd be fun to sit down and rank them. I've done this with my green eyeshadow palettes, which, y'all, green is my favorite color, so that video was a lot. Like, there were a lot of palettes we went through. If you missed it, I'll leave it linked up here if you'd like to check it out and see, but I'm going to try to do this where I kind of take a category of makeup that I have a decent amount of palettes collected, like pastels today, and we're going to rank them from my least favorite all the way to my most favorite. So if you are interested in that, let's go ahead and cut the chit chat and jump right into it. So I always like to start at the bottom, because that way, as the video progresses, we work our way all the way up to my number 1, and it's just a nice way to end the video. So we're starting at the very bottom, the number 8 palette, the palette that I would not recommend, and I honestly don't really plan to use, but have been holding on to it as just like a resource for future palettes and future palettes from this brand and future pastel palettes. But it is the Klarity Cosmetics So Mermazing palette. Now, I did do a video on this palette, so if you want to see in real time the issues I was having, check out that video. I will leave it linked up here or down in the description box. But this palette was very difficult, not only the shimmers but also the mattes, and that's really what kind of, you know, really struck it for me as just being a no-go when it comes to this palette and just not worth touching, because not only are the shimmers kind of messy, I mean, they're beautiful, they're very, very pretty, but also it's that palette that just by me opening this, I'm gonna have like glitter all over my face by the time this video is done, just because I feel like the sparkle and shimmer in this palette is gorgeous, but it just gets everywhere. The moment you touch it, the moment you open it, it just gets everywhere. But that aside, if you're not someone who like cares about messy eyeshadows, I'm someone who does. That's why it lands a little bit low. But that aside, the mattes also just weren't working for me. As I said, I did a video. You can see in that video as I'm trying to blend them, they're patching up, they're dusting away, they're not super pigmented, or they just don't want to blend into each other, which was, it's a huge deal when you're wanting to create an eyeshadow look and they don't want to blend, or they, as you're blending them, they just start balding away and you get patches on your eyes. So that video was a hot mess express. I mean, the shimmers are beautiful, so they do save it in that aspect, but they're also just very messy shimmers, and messy to the point of, even with like a glitter primer or something tacky on my eyelid to try and make sure they all stay, you will get shimmer all down your face and all up your face. It's a rare thing for me to get sparkle on my forehead from what I'm wearing on my eyes, but literally I had sparkle like all over my face, on my forehead, on my cheeks, fallout, up in my brows just from opening and shutting my eyes. They were very messy, and for me, it's just too messy. Yes, they're beautiful. Yes, they're sparkly and whatnot, but just too messy. And on top of that, like I said, the mattes just aren't good. And if you're new around here, I love mattes. I love working with mattes. That's my favorite aspect of an eyeshadow palette. Like, yes, the shimmers and sparkles are very pretty to put on your eyelid, but I just enjoy playing with mattes and mixing them and meshing them together into my, you know, crease and my outer corner and just having fun with them. And with these just being so finicky, I mean, just so finicky when I was using it, it was just a no-go for me. So for me, this was a huge dud, and it wasn't a cheap palette. If I remember correctly, it was rather pricey, and for it to be such a dud for both the mattes and the shimmers for me, like I said, it's a palette I keep in my collection just to reference back to as I try more pastel palettes, and then hopefully, like, as I continue to try the brand, because this is the only palette I've tried from the brand. So I want to try other palettes from the brand, because I've always heard great things about their mattes and their shimmers and their formula and whatnot, but this one, it was just not it for me. Not a great introduction to the brand, so hence why it's getting at the very bottom of all my pastel palettes. Okay, next up is going to be the Glamlite Ice Cream Palette. Now, they do get a little bonus point for being just cute, adorable packaging, like with the little sprinkles and whatnot. It came in a box that was shaped like an ice cream truck, and my kids played with that thing for months. But anyway, getting to the actual palette at hand, this was an interesting take on pastels, because not only did it have a lot of pastels, but it had a lot of neutrals. And my biggest gripe with this palette, besides having a bit of issue with blending some of these pastels, was there were just so many very neutral type of shimmers. However, if you're someone who has wanted to dip your toes into color or pastels and you like a lot of neutrals and you just want a little bit of pastels to play with, you know, maybe you would find this a plus when you're looking at this palette. But for me personally, I had a little bit of a difficulty with actually working with the shades in here. Some of them, honestly, I can't remember exactly which ones. I want to say the purples, but don't quote me on that. I think I did 2 different videos, a 3 looks and then a first impressions. I'll leave that video in the description box if you want to go watch it, because obviously I did that video right after I did my eye look, so I remember it a lot better than now going on, gosh, a year or 2. So anyway, check that video out if you want to know exactly which eyeshadows were giving me issues. But I do remember having some issues of like patching or just not wanting to stick down, and just also not wanting to like mesh and blend with some shades and stuff like that. So that definitely sticks out in my memory when I think back on this palette, and hence why it's not getting super high in the countdown, just because of those issues. But I mean, you know, the shimmers, when you're talking about the more colorful shimmers, I did really like it. They were a little bit, you know, they were pastels, but they had a nice amount of color to them, which I appreciate when it comes to, you know, a shimmer or a matte. If it's going to be pastel, I at least want it to be punchy. I don't want it to be like a barely there or just an iridescent sparkle of like a pastel color. That's just not my personal preference. So I did enjoy aspects of this palette, but those aspects that really stick out in my head when I look at this palette are how many neutral shimmers are in the palette, how many neutral just tones in general are in the palette, but then also the issues I had with blending some of the pastels in here, which is, you know, what I grabbed this palette mostly for, was the pastels and the fun with the pastels and whatnot. So hence why it's landing at number 7. It's not as bad as So Mermazing. It's definitely a palette, like I said, depending on your preferences, depending on what you like, depending on like how much you like to play with pastels, putting them together. Watch my video. If those aren't an issue for you, then I do think you'll like it. Or if you're someone who likes a lot of neutrals in with your shimmers and you just want 1 or 2, you know, pops of pastel in a look, then this might be a palette for you. But for me personally, it's landing at number 7 because of those issues that really stick out and stand out in my mind. Next up is going to be the Fade into Hue Colourpop palette. Now this palette, I was a little torn. I see it as a pastel palette, but I do feel like it's also just kind of like a rainbow palette, but there aren't so many tones up here specifically, or, you know, down here, but this is the way it's supposed to be. Up here specifically that are very light and pastel, and when I use this palette in eyeshadow looks, I feel like the looks themselves just turn out being nice and, you know, pigmented, but still it still gives me a pastelish vibe to it. Excluding this bottom row, I do realize they're very bright. I just felt like it's pastelish in my eyes. I'm gonna put it in my pastel eyeshadow palette collection. But anyway, moving on to the quality of them. I did enjoy this palette, but obviously it's not ranking super high among all of my pastel palettes because there were some issues with this palette that stand out to me whenever I think back at this palette that weren't my favorite. First starters, the glitters in here, the pressed glitters, I think there was 1, 2, 3. I didn't like them. Like, they were very messy, they're very chunky, and it's just, I would have rather them not have been in there. But on top of that, the shimmers in this palette I felt like were pretty lackluster. Like when I would use it, depending on the different shades, like you almost couldn't tell. Like, it's such a light pastel green that when you actually use them and you're using them, you know, together with other shades or whatnot, you almost couldn't tell the different colors because they were just so light in tone. It just kind of looked like a pastel mesh of colors. Like nothing popped out, kind of like with the Glamlite when I swatched and held up that green pastel. It popped as a nice green, vibrant pastel. These were all very, very soft when it came to the colors of the shimmers. And some of them, depending on the type of shimmer, it also just bordered on almost like a satiny type of like a finish to them. And I'm someone who likes more of a metallic or just a really sparkly type of shimmer for my shimmers personally. And overall, the mattes in here were definitely my preference. For me, Colourpop tends to be, you know, just in general, their formula is very lightly pigmented and, you know, takes some building up and whatnot, but I was happy to see these bottom rows here. It did pack a nice punch, so hence why it's not landing, you know, super low. I do like it. I would use it if I had to again, but definitely the shimmers and then the glitters I don't like, but the shimmers just didn't stand out in my mind as being something I enjoyed. So hence why it's landing where it is, but it's not a bad palette. It's not a terrible palette. I think it's a great palette to have if you want to have like one type of rainbow palette in your collection to kind of add in or just play around with, and you don't want to like break the bank and spend a ton of money. You get a lot of colors in here, a lot of different hues of the same pink, orange, yellow, green, that sort of thing. So I think that's great. But for me personally, because I have other palettes in my collection that I enjoy the shimmers and mattes and whatnot more, that's why I put it where it's at. All right, next up is going to be the Shroud Cosmetics Creepy Cute palette. They used to be called Strobe, so it's on here as Strobe, but this palette is a really fun take for a pastel palette. It's an all matte palette, which I do enjoy my all matte looks, so I had a lot of fun with this palette, but on top of it being a pastel palette, they just gave it a little bit of a twist with it having a black and a gray in it. And I just thought that it made it a lot of fun and just a little bit more unique. You guys know for me personally, I love pastels and playing with pastels, especially in the spring, but I do like my depth in the outer corner, and if things are too light, it doesn't feel me. It's not my preference when it comes to the type of looks I have. So I like to have depth in my outer corner, and having a black in here gives me that depth. The quality of the mattes are really, really nice. They're definitely a little bit tougher to pick up with your finger if you're someone who likes to just touch and swatch. Like some of them pick up fine, but some of them kind of tend to have a bit of a hard pan, I would say, on top of it. However, when you take your brush and you're swirling or, you know, dabbing it into the product, into the pan, you don't have any problems getting performance on your eyes. So that's kind of what I like to see. Personally, I don't really care if it swatches nice on my finger. I just want it to perform nice on my eyes. And I like that it had a heavy emphasis on the green and blue. And overall, it's just a nice pastel palette. Like I really don't have any huge complaints. I had a great time with it. Like I said, if you're someone who gets easily annoyed by a hard pan, maybe you won't love this formula. I do think this brand, I mean, this was back when they were Shroud Cosmetics, was it 2-3 years ago? It's been a little while since they rebranded. So I'm sure the formula has continued to improve. I've tried other more recent palettes from her and I don't really experience that type of hard pan, but just to throw it out there, if you are someone who doesn't like hard pan, I do have some on a couple of the shades in this palette, but like I said, it doesn't bother me. If it did, I could just scrape it off and it'd be fine. But like I said, it doesn't do anything to the performance. But overall, like I liked all of the mattes in this palette and I like the uniqueness with the color story. So hence why it's landing pretty high. It's right in the middle because it's a little bit of a smaller palette, but it's a solid little pastel palette that I do like and would recommend. All right, top 3. This is where it gets so very hard because I really like them all. But for the third place, I'm going to put the Menagerie Pastel Pup palette. This palette came out, I think, a year or two ago. But this was a fun addition to Menagerie's line of palettes. Like a all pastel palette with one black in there. We just talked about how much I like that. It was a great addition to their brand and I think a great addition to the indie makeup world, having a pastel palette that really had a heavy emphasis on the mattes but gave you a really special shimmer that no matter what mattes you were using to work with and create a pastel look, the shimmer went so beautifully with it. Now I do remember it wasn't my favorite type of shimmer because it could be chunky, it was a bit loose and sheer-ish, but it's still a pretty shimmer that for a pastel look looked very nice mixing it with the pastels. But overall, quality-wise, as always when it comes to Menagerie Cosmetics, I was very impressed. You get a lot of pigment. They're very soft, easy to pick up, easy to blend. Like, look at all that pigment. I like a pastel that shows up on your eyes as beautifully as it does in the pan. It always annoys me if in the pan it looks like pastel and then you put it on your eyes and you're like, I think I see a hint of color, like it almost disappears or just doesn't have enough pigment to really stand out in your eye look. No, these all stand out beautifully and I was super impressed. I love the color story as well, giving you like one of each color of the rainbow when it comes to pastels. And like I said, a black and a white. I was very, very happy with this palette. Create a lot of fun looks and it's just a solid palette. On top of that, of course, when it comes to Menagerie Cosmetics, like we were just looking at, look at this cute, adorable packaging. I like pretty packaging when it comes to my palettes. Yes, the most important emphasis for me is the quality of the eyeshadow, of course, if it's going to perform well for the mattes and shimmers. But if both of those hit the mark and it's got adorable packaging, like that just gets a couple more, you know, a couple more bonus points, brownie points, whatever you want it. And this little palette is so cute. It's a perfect type of, you know, cover design to do for a pastel palette in my opinion, and it made it very memorable for me personally, the Pastel Pup palette. And yeah, if you are looking for a, you know, nice solid well-rounded pastel palette to add to your collection that has more of a focus on the mattes and just a shimmer to throw on top of whatever look you put together, I think you'd be very happy with this. And as I said, the black, I really do like having a black to give depth. I did a video on my channel back then, I think it was just a 3 looks 1 palette type of video, so if you want to get some inspiration, I will try and link it down below. I'm going to try to link all the videos that I've done with these palettes down below for your reference. So if I forget to tell you guys for the rest of the palettes, I will have it down there below in the description box. So if you want more information or if you just want to get some inspiration on type of looks that I've done with pastels, check the description box after this video. Okay, for my number 2 palette, this is from Playing in Makeup by Yolondo. It's called the Jamrock Colored Wasashini Pastel Eyeshadow Palette. It's quite the mouthful and I tend to just call it the pastel palette from Playing in Makeup by Yolondo, but I just wanted to give you the full title there if you are searching it up and looking around for it. Here's the palette. It is huge, as you can see. Like I have to bend my head over because it's a large palette. But I mean, you're getting a ton of product in here. As you can see, like these pans are pretty darn big. I'm trying to think of something to compare it to. I feel like Colourpop's palettes are pretty popular when it comes to their size. Oh, I actually have a video comparing these two specifically. So if you want to see a video with like comparing these two palettes and kind of putting one on each eye type of thing, I will leave that video up here in the cards, but I'll also put in the description box. But as you can see, like the size of these pans to the size of these pans, what would you call that? Like double? It's definitely very large. So you're getting a lot of product in here and you get a lot of variety. Like there is just so much when it comes to this palette. You get lots of pastels in there that are very like soft in color, but don't let that fool you. The pigment really shows up. It's not like one of those, you know, barely there type of hint of color. This is the black, sorry. Hint of color. They pop, they show up, and then also you have these other more brighter, like more intense here. This is the one that's, you know, dirty with the black, but watch this. This hot pink totally covers the black. Like, you can't even see that the black was on there. Her shadows are very pigmented, and I feel like she's continued to improve her matte formula, but this palette specifically, like, this palette is great formula. I really did like the mattes. Was super happy. They're just so intense. This was another favorite of mine. Like, look, just so intense, so smooth as well, and like takes no work when you're using them on your eyes. They show up very beautifully, very, very intense. They show up on your eyelids just like they do in the pan, which, as I've said, is my favorite and my preference when it comes to pastels or just any eyeshadow in general. If it's gonna look like that in the pan, I want it to look like that on my eyes. The shimmers in here is where it's a bit of a downfall, but I mean, honestly, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shimmers out of this huge palette, so I don't dock it too much for that, but I did really enjoy these two shimmers, the Raven and Precious. I will definitely say that I feel like I've tried recent palettes from her that she came out with a couple months ago. She's definitely improved her shimmer formula from this palette to that. That is definitely something encouraging if you're checking out the brand. Her more recent shimmers are very, very nice, but the majority of these I just felt like were either difficult to pick up, difficult to smooth over the eyelid, or honestly just, I mean, I don't know, just wasn't my preference or wasn't anything like super special. It was more of like a satin type of look to the eyes or whatnot. But yeah, overall, it is an expensive palette. I mean, it is a very large palette, as you can see. So the price is pretty pricey when it comes to this palette, but if you are new to playing in makeup by Yolondo, the brand, as a brand, I would recommend signing up for her email list, or if you want to, you know, follow her on Instagram. And she not infrequently does 40% off sales. She frequently has sales, and some of them, you know, are good, and some of them are, you know, not a bad steal and whatnot, but every now and then, a couple times a year, she'll do 40% off, and that's the best sale I've ever seen. And that's when I've placed 3 orders from her so far, and 2 of them have always been when they were 40% off. I just placed an order this past week for a new release, so I had to pay full price. Not full price, I used a discount code for I think 10% off or 5% off or something like that, but I would have preferred to wait for a 40% off sale. But yeah, overall, it's just a great pastel palette. Again, another palette that if you wanted to just have one in your collection, you could get this and you'd be set. You have so many options. Even with the shimmers not being my favorite, you can create a bunch of different type of looks with this palette. All right, and finally, for my #1 palette when it comes to my pastel collection, let me know if you're not new around here. If you've been following me for a while, could you already guess which one I'm going to put at #1? Pause the video and let me know down below in the comments. But for my #1, it has to go to Gimme Glow Pastel Dreams. This palette has such a special place in my heart because I just love the way she set this up. It's simple, but it's just thorough. Like, it's got everything you need. It has a shimmer and a matte of each of the colors of the rainbow for pastels. And it just makes putting looks together, if you're someone who loves a monochromatic pastel look, like, it's just so easy. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, I had to count. I am pregnant and tired, but anyway, 6 different looks right there. But then you can also mix and match them together. The quality of the mattes are so very nice. They're very nice and easy to blend. They're very nice and pigmented as well. Like, you don't have to worry about, you know, it not showing up. Like, look how intense that is. It picks up so beautifully on your finger. It's such a beautiful formula. I know I rave all the time about Gimme Glow's matte formula, but it is one of my favorites when it comes to indie makeup brands and the matte formulas. Gimme Glow is at the very top of my list, just because I feel like they always hit it out of the park when it comes to like pigmentation, when it comes to ease of blending, when it comes to ease of use, because they're super pigmented, but they're not like that type of formula where when you dip your brush into it, you have to touch carefully or you get tons of kick up and just too much product. You don't have to be that careful, but it's just easy to use, is I guess what I'm saying. Nice and pigmented, nice and easy to blend, and nice and easy to use. That's why I love her matte formula. But then also the shimmers. These shimmers are beautiful. They definitely give you that type of metallic finish, not so much like sparkly, like if, you know, kind of Glamlite, I feel like is very, at least in my opinion, from what I've tried of them, they're very well known for like that sparkle, like that's just intense, crazy sparkle with their shimmers. These are definitely more of just like metallic or just foiled metallic, that type of shimmer, but they're absolutely beautiful. Some of them are more of a softer color, but still give you lots of like, look at that shine, lots of shine. And others of them, like this yellow, I feel like are definitely a little bit more metallic on the lid and just a little bit more foiled looking when you create eye looks with them, but they're just so pretty. And also because these are pastels, I did get away with using some of them as a face highlight on occasion when I was using this palette to create looks. And that's also a dual purpose because I've used many of Gimme Glow's shimmer formulas as highlights in the past. This formula is no different. It performs very beautifully, so I like this palette for that purpose as well. And overall, yeah, just a well-rounded palette. As I said, my favorite aspect of this is just that I love her shimmer quality. I love her matte quality. I like that she put one of each for each of the colors in here, and it makes it just so easy and simple. If you're someone who wants to get one palette and just not have a ton of options, like maybe some of the other bigger palettes are just a little overwhelming, I feel like this is a great option to go for. It's just a fantastic palette to have in your eyeshadow collection like arsenal as you're creating looks and whatnot, and it's just my favorite pastel. When I have to think over all the pastel palettes that I own, this definitely reigns supreme as my #1 favorite. Gimme Glow did a fantastic job with this. And also, one last note here before we kind of finish out talking and raving about the Gimme Glow, I love the names that she picked for this palette. Her names are always like just spot on. I absolutely love them, but it definitely makes it just extra cute when you use it, and it has such adorable names. All right, so there you have it. That is my pastel palette collection, and that is me ranking them from the worst all the way to the best. Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, I love to hear what you guys think, and let me know what category of my palettes you would like to see me do next. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I've done green palettes recently and then now pastel palettes, so I'm trying to think if I should just do rainbow palettes in general, though, because those I definitely have a few more that I would consider rainbow palettes and whatnot. So yeah, give me your ideas down below. I don't know how many blue palettes I own. I don't think I have many, so I'm not sure if I could do that, but I have a handful of yellow palettes. We might be able to do a video ranking my favorite yellow palettes. Leave your recommendations down below. I'm keeping a list on my phone, and as you guys give me your suggestions, I will add it to the list, and then I'll check my collection out, and if I have enough palettes, kind of like in today's video, if I have 5 or so palettes in that category, then I'll sit down and I will rank them for you guys, because I just like doing these type of ranking videos, and it's so fun to go back to palettes that I've already used in my collection and just be able to talk to you guys about them. So with that said, that is going to do it for me. I can't wait to hear what you guys think down below in the comments, but if you want to continue getting daily content from me, I'm over on Instagram. I'm LadyKatie92 over there. I've been pretty active over there recently, posting 1 or 2 times a day. I've been trying to get my game up over there, but if you like reels, if you like quick tutorials, if you like close-up eye shots, so like if you like to see a close-up of this shot, I'll probably have it on my Instagram soon, if not already. And with all that said, I'll see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.